got one wrist that's gone, you got finger
I have
on the
no
other
functioning hands. Okay, we're all set? So this is the Department of Children and Families, DCF. And we have the commissioner here with their FY20, whatever year this is, budget adjustment, 24, budget adjustment request. And if you want to introduce, you just have.
Sure, just with me today is Sean Benham of our business office, and he's subbing for Megan Speed.
So we look forward, we'll work from this document. Is that what you're planning?
Yes, please, to start.
Okay.
I can give a quick overview if that works for you.
All right, that'll be fine.
Sure. For the record, my name is Chris Winters. I'm the Commissioner of the Department for Children and Families, and also with me is
Sean Benham, Financial Director.
And we're here to present the Budget Adjustment Act for FY24. We do have a PowerPoint. If it's possible to share that at this time. Thank you.
Do you have the Zoom link or were you not?
I don't think we're on the Zoom link.
Okay. I can pull
Would
it
you,
up.
if you prefer for us to do that next time, we can be prepared for that. I'm sorry.
Yes, but I can pull it up.
It's just a couple of slides to give a very quick overview before we get into the line by line.
Everybody has it.
Okay, everybody has it in front of them.
Yeah, we
Great,
do.
great.
So we can keep
Yeah,
going.
so I'll keep going. Just very briefly, the mission of the Department for Children and Families as a part of the Agency of Human Services is to foster the healthy development, safety, and well-being and self-sufficiency of Vermonters. And within this proposed BAA, you'll see a 1.6% increase over the fiscal year 24 budget as passed. And in this BAA, it addresses key caseload pressures and system of care needs. It also addresses some technical corrections, revenue adjustments, and efforts to maximize federal funding wherever we can do that. And you can see in the pie chart the different funding sources and the amounts for general fund, special fund, interdepartmental transfer, federal funds, and global commitment split out by Medicaid GC, investment GC.
Oh, Hannah's brought it up, so we've done it on the screen.
Some of the highlights within this is from the different divisions within economic services. It's to increase the 211 contract through global commitment investment, an adjustment to the emergency housing call center contract. Within family services, new random moment in time study, private non-medical institution updates, and caseload savings. Some of the other revenue and rate adjustments, federal grants in the Child Development Division, AABD personal needs increase, and realigned targeted case management revenues. And we'll get into specifics on each one of these as we do the walkthrough. Just a couple more things.
You have PNMI under family services, but Reach Up is under economic services and.
There's one provider.
At one,
And,
right.
yeah,
So that's not in the economic services bucket. We've got it in family services, which to me, when I first looked at it, I thought, well, you PNMI, we think of the group homes, for example, to people or whatever. So I'm just wondering, is the Reach Up related?
There are adjustments in both.
both?
Yeah, the slide just summarizes family services, but we do have adjustments on the Reach Up side also.
Okay.
On the ups and downs.
And then the housing one-time requests, it's in the BAA for AHS, but we are happy to speak to it here. The emergency housing needs analysis, that's approximately $8.2 million to take up the pressures that we've seen under the existing emergency housing policies all the way through to June 30th, as well as the Act 81 pressures for what we refer to as the June cohort through April 1st of 2024.
Oh, what is the Act 81 called?
So Act 81 was the law passed last year to allow those in the hotels to stay there through April 1st. Oh, some of them.
I assume that's what it was.
Yeah, the vulnerable and catastrophic categories.
We tend not to remember acts because we think of a particular bill, yeah, a bill.
And then the $4 million asked here in BAA is for a temporary shelter proposal to further extend shelters primarily for those who are exiting the June cohort on April 1st. And I can speak with more detail to that.
All right, Senator Lyons is,
Do you want us to ask questions now, or do you want to go through the whole thing first?
why don't we, no, we can ask questions. These are, you're going through the different pieces of your, so we already are doing the housing. So if it's related to the slide on temporary housing and 4 million and the 8 million, then now's the time to ask the question.
So, so on the temporary shelters, and we'll be talking about this late and at another time as well, but where are these shelters being developed, and do you have the facilities ready to go? Are they being retrofit? What are we looking at?
So I'll give you the very big picture at this moment because we could get into this for quite a bit of time.
I know that, that's why I hesitated to ask a question, but.
So I think painting the picture in broad strokes, we are focusing on the 5 communities where we know the most people are residing in hotels and motels. And that's Burlington, that's Central Vermont, Barry, Berlin, Montpelier, that's Rutland, that has the highest number.
Yeah, Rutland has higher.
And Bennington and Brattleboro. So we're focusing our efforts in those 5 areas to create some temporary shelter for people that we know will still be in the hotel motel program on April 1st, especially focusing on the June cohort. That's the group of people who are in the vulnerable and catastrophic categories who are extended their stay.
So a couple of questions there. One, define create.
So, we've been working pretty much nonstop to try to expand shelter capacity. We've had limited success with existing shelters. You'll see in FY24 and FY25 some additional base funding to create about 180 more shelter beds from a system that was somewhere down around 460. I think now we're probably up closer to 400.
So I guess the question is, where is it? What's the physical plant look like? And is it there? Are you purchasing it? Are you purchasing hotels? So I'm trying
Probably
to
all of the
So
above.
all of the
Yeah,
above.
I know,
It's
trying to
it's like
sort all
taking
this
an
out.
approach wherever we can to add beds.
Okay,
And so just to start the conversation, it's first trying to expand our traditional shelter system that we know works well, works better than hotels and motels. And so we're trying to add capacity there. But the challenges we consistently face are we don't have workforce. We're already stretched too thin. So you talk to your local community providers and many of them aren't willing to take on more because they can't take on more or they can't hire the staff to do it. When we try to create new shelters in communities, it's often difficult to cite. You see community opposition, Hyde Park or St. Johnsbury, some of the other places where we tried to create new shelters, there's often community opposition. And then of course there's budget.
We sit in court almost a year in Hyde Park.
That's right.
So
Right. So those are some of the challenges in creating new shelters. So we're really trying hard to do that. We are looking across our agency for expanding other types of residential beds, whether it's through Dale or DMH or Department of Health or Department of Corrections. So it's an all of the above approach. What we're finding is in order to have more shelter on April 1st, there are a couple of community projects that we can talk about that we're really excited about. One of them being at Winston Prouty in Brattleboro, the former Austin School for the Deaf. They've got a couple of dorms, dormant. And so they're willing to put up some shelters that would really serve families well. But we're talking about 20, 25 units, serving a certain number of families when we're talking about exiting over 600 households on April 1st. Central Vermont, we're looking at a hotel lease, converting a hotel to a lease model with a community partner. That's all kind of still in the works, not finalized yet. Bringing on beds at a similar rate to what we're paying hotels, maybe a little bit less, but it comes with the service provider running it. Comes with a service provider running it and hopefully connecting people to the things that they need to get to more permanent housing faster. And then I'll just say the last model that we're looking at is mobile shelter units. And so we have a provider who can bring to the table both the staffing and the mobile shelter units. This is a third-party contractor. They're not part of our existing shelter system. They can bring in mobile units to set up a standalone shelter of about 46 units. They're like camper-style trailers. They have a common space. They have portable showers, toilets, a common area, and a cooking area. Those are expensive. And
It was like the 5-bedroom ones for $200,000, or is that something different?
I'm not sure what you're referring to there.
These should be on wheels.
Those are on wheels. They're flexible. We can move them
So
around.
it's not the bigger one.
But I just want to be clear that so with this $4 million and $2.3 million in one time, so it was $10 million in one time that was in that Act 81 to help with shelter with transition. So we have about 6.3 total to work with. We are looking at perhaps 200 beds.
200?
You just named
Something like that.
71, so, yeah.
So with the mobile shelter, mobile units at 46 each, we're still like constantly pressing for, give us an idea for a place where you have a building available where, and we can possibly bring in the staffing for that if there isn't any workforce. So we're throwing, just about everything we can at this to come up with a number of shelters that are not going to meet all of those that are exiting on April 1st.
So you don't need to explicate right now, but, because I know others have questions, but within our committee, we will want to know if have identified the folks who have the chronic needs or the disabilities and how they are being identified, and then how you're linking them with this temporary shelter. Yeah, so you don't need to go there.
Senator Bernstein, Senator Westman.
Thanks, Chris. I'm appreciating the information. If I'm understanding right, you're talking about the 8.2 taking us to April 1st, and then the 6.3, the 2.3 that's left from Act 81, or is the 2.3 part of?
It is not. So the 8.2 is to continue general assistance housing through July 1st. So that might be the June 30 cohort to April 1st. And that might also be people who are in there for adverse weather conditions. Right now, we saw more people take that up than we thought might. And it's also people who are in general assistance housing through the vulnerable and catastrophic categories. So we've seen more people utilize the general assistance housing program
Understood.
than we thought. So that's to get us through to July 1st with all forms of general assistance.
If we can just clarify, the 2.3 is added to which number?
4.
That's what I
Yep, there was 10 million in one-time funds in Act 81.
Okay, so
We used
What-
7.7.
what's bothering me about this temporary proposal, and I said as much to the secretary when she was in here yesterday, I think. So you said we're throwing everything we have at it, but the ask is 4 million additional, and with that, an admission that it's not going to cover it. And so I don't understand how it can be throwing everything we have at it and still saving money and saying we're not going to cover everybody. It seems like throwing everything we have at it would be, we have a plan to cover everybody and we're asking for that much money. But this, by the secretary's admission and yours, I think, this doesn't cover everybody. There will be, the June cohort will not be completely covered. And if there was one intent behind Act 81, it was to put in law that this specific group of folks, the most vulnerable, would not be exited from the program unless there was space for them. But what you've laid out for us is a plan for 200 beds. And we're going to have well over that, hundreds of them.
Oh, we have about 680, wasn't it?
Right. And that number will come down, but there'll still be a delta of a couple hundred, 300. So I'm wondering why the plan you're coming forward with doesn't cover everyone. I mean, it seems like a simple question, but
I guess I would say no plan is gonna cover everyone 100%. We just don't have the resources for that. If the legislature has other ideas or wants to put more.
Well, I have an idea.
Sure.
So we're going from 8 million to 4 million is the
Yeah.
ask, which is, a reduction of 4 million. What if your ask was 8 million and there was no reduction? You would have a pool of additional resources and maybe more
I didn't
opportunities.
interpret it that
And-
way.
No, it's 8 million plus 4. It's 8 plus 4.
No, but what I'm saying is for the April 1 cohort, that money's gonna run out. And then after that point, for them, there is a smaller amount that is from the get-go determined to be not enough. And I don't know how I can go out of here and say, I greenlit a proposal that admitted it wasn't enough to cover everybody who needs housing in that cohort, because Act 81 made it clear that we were covering those folks. So
I think one of the things that I haven't said yet, that I think is very important to this conversation, is that in using the hotels and motels, and that could be one answer, is to keep people in
We may
hotels
have
and
to,
motels.
it's not desirable, but
It's very, very expensive. I think they are profiteering. I know it's a strong word, but some of the prices that we are being charged for these hotels are above market rate. We're filling their hotels in a number of instances, and their profit model is great right now, and they want to continue that. And we're using so many hotel rooms, it would be really difficult for us to say, well, we're shutting down this one, because then we've got 50 households we have to find someplace else to.
And I get that, and I've spoken at several levels in the administration about those negotiations, and I'm glad they're underway. But I guess what I would say is, we started with 3,000 or so in the motel program. We're now talking about 680. By the time we get to April 1st, maybe we're talking about, let's say, 300. Why not have DCF request the money that it might take to extend that remainder of the cohort, in addition to this plan, which would cover a chunk of the cohort, but not all.
I think so just to make sure we're being clear on the numbers, it was 1,270 something when we started.
Individuals,
Those are households.
right. I was thinking of the individuals.
Yep, right. And now we're down in the 680 or so range. There was a lot of people coming out in the first couple of months at a fairly rapid pace, finding other things, deciding they didn't want anything to do with the program anymore. Addicted for misconduct, another one of the larger numbers. But in recent months, we have seen a much slower decline in numbers of people coming out. So we're at the 680 or so range. We don't expect that's going to drop a lot over the next 2.5 months.
And to my point, why not come forward with a budget request that covers everything?
The proposal that we have before us is what we think is within our means to both put together and to also send a very clear message to the hotels. Until we can break that reliance on the hotels, we're not able to reduce the spending on the hotels. The prices themselves, we're trying very hard to negotiate them down right now, but they really have no incentive. Another thing that we're really trying to do is to do some hotel conversions to affordable housing. And I am remiss in not saying, one of the most effective things that we can do is create more housing units, because we may have the resources to give people subsidies and transition them into housing, but we have no place to move them to. So I think that's another reason why the cohort has not been moving out at the rates that they may have originally, that we have no units to move them into. I think the bigger strategy is the housing units, and to tackle the hotel and motel stranglehold that they have, and the prices that they are charging. The dollars will be much more well spent.
I understand about the hotels and the negotiations. But I guess what I'm saying is, we've reduced the reliance on hotels.
Yeah.
And it will continue to be reduced. And there will remain a swath of hotels still being used. So it seems like at that point to say that, it's a negotiating tactic in effect to leave hundreds of people potentially on the street is maybe not going to work, number one. And number two, we're spending so much less on hotels than we were. So having that as the last resort for that June cohort seems a basic thing. The only other thing I'll add is that I understand about bed capacity and how hard it is to bring online. Burlington came forward with a proposal when you put out a request for proposals for the Cherry Street building owned by the state. It's a huge building, and I know that there are some issues with it that would need fixing, but Burlington is desperate to do it. They have a building that's owned by the state. It's big. It could, some of these proposals you're talking about are 25 beds. This would be bigger than that. And it would really help in one of the areas in the state where we most need it. And they have been completely unsuccessful in getting anything started with that property. And it seems like a missed opportunity. So I will end it there, and I thank you for your insight.
I think that property's on the market for sale, right?
Well, and it wouldn't have been. Anyway.
No,
They used it.
I think there were a number of reasons why Cherry Street was not viable, but I guess folks might.
I think part of it was there's no sprinkler system, so there's some fire safety issues that have to be addressed, but
Right.
that was part of the
But
plan.
I'm thinking if it was gonna be, let's say, a permanent shelter, we could put in the fire system.
So I need to go back to the sequence of people with questions. Senator Weston, Senator Berklick, and then Senator Sears.
So as somebody that has dealt with some of these communities for years and trying to get shelters, and I might preface, this committee and has put money for years into trying to get a shelter in Rutland and been totally unsuccessful. And I would say that goes back for years well before COVID. And knowing that you've got 680 odd, I think you said, places to fill, and your report that you're giving, I want to be a little respectful because this is really a follow-up to what Senator Baruth just brought up. Same report we got in joint fiscal a month ago. So it would be helpful to me if what physically we're looking at in those 5 communities on a sheet, what physical building are we looking at, what physical, and where we are in the sequence to get there, and how much does that reduce the 680 so I can sequentially see where all of this is. Because quite frankly, I'm very skeptical, having dealt and trying to put something in a city like Rutland now for 6 or 7 years and not being successful, thinking that we're gonna have poof something open in Rutland by April 1st. I don't know how you
So
do
to
it.
prove it to me at this point.
Yeah, so I got to see a plan that says here physically is the stuff.
It was Rutland and Barry, but now Barry is done.
But Barry moved and Rutland didn't, so.
I think in summary, what we're seeing is a timeline, and then what would be created relative to the population. And that it just seems like if we're talking about a lot of them are single individuals who are part of that 680, people with disabilities, if the units are there, brought online, and even your plan doesn't put that many. I think that's
So
really
how
what
can
we're
I-
struggling with, is how do we, or are we, you don't want to take your foot off the accelerator, but on the other hand, are we going to really see that we're continuing out of necessity beyond April 1 for certain vulnerable populations, and the extent to which the money will be there to support it? It probably will. I mean, in the sense, April 1st, we're still going to be here. we're, I expect we'll be having a recalibration, but I think that's really what people are concerned about is what does this bring on,
We'd
when?
love to come back and provide some more details.
And actually,
So you can see what it actually does.
it would be nice to have you back, but on a sheet, if I knew that in each of these communities, this is physically what we're looking at. And this is how many we think it will reduce the 680 by. It gets exactly at the question that Senator Bruce is asking, what's the whole?
Yeah, we can do that.
Senator Kirchner, and then Senator Sears.
Similar line of questioning, but I just wanted to be really clear because I think this was a point that I wasn't clear on when we were talking about the hotel program last year. So we talk about the cohort, but to be specific, this could be people with disabilities and this could be children, correct? That would be kicked out of the hotels. And you would have some small portion or some 20% might find it bad at a shelter, but those other seniors with disabilities and children could be out on the street.
They're definitely a large portion of the cohort from what we know of the folks that are there. And we can come back with more specifics about the population specifically. And that's why we're really trying to focus on a few options for families, of course. And then we're trying to connect our other AHS departments to the cohort. We do have panel managers and we're trying to do care management plans to work with people who might have,
But if we were to approve this plan, we would be approving a plan that would be kicking some portion of the population to the street.
What we are talking about is going back to the pre-pandemic approach with the hotels and motels. We would love to expand the traditional shelter model because we know it's much more successful. And so more investment in our traditional shelter model is entirely appropriate. Making it happen is not easy. No plan that we have is going to be a perfect plan. No plan is going to cover 100% of the homeless population. It never has, never will. You can look at other states and see how they're doing. There are no easy.
Yeah, I'm mostly concerned about those like seniors with disabilities and children kind of. And then I like the idea of the temporaries, but I don't like that they're temporary, which is another question, spending money on a temporary solution. Because that's what you're talking about, temporary, like they would be there.
Hotels and motels are temporary as well, so it's like.
Yeah, it's one temporary to
almost.
another temporary, so, but taking the pressure off the hotels and maybe give you more negotiating pressure, but are we sure we're gonna save any money? Because it seems like the cost per bed per night would be about the same.
It could be similar, it depends on the project, but what it does do is you need to let the hotels and motels know that that program is gonna end and we need to shift to a different model. And until we do that, they're gonna have us over the barrel and we're gonna keep paying and putting money into hotels, into private for-profit facilities when we should be investing it in longer term, more effective solutions.
And is one of the reasons you're proposing just the 5, even though you know it's not gonna meet that code, those children and seniors with disabilities, is because because of staffing and other things, that you can only do 5? Or do you think you could do more if you had
That's the
more
high
money?
demand, that's where the larger numbers are.
That is where the
Problem
larger,
is number one.
the larger numbers are. I don't wanna say, I don't wanna
Right,
limit
but
this.
this is not meeting the whole thing, so if you could do more than one in a community, so are you picking 5 just because that's what you can only do 5, or because you want to limit the money and the money you had is 5?
I guess it's a mix of both. We are focusing in on the 5 communities, but there are other projects that are popping up around the state that we're looking
And
at.
it could be more than one
It could be
shelter per community.
And Rutherford would
absolutely
have to
will
be,
be.
I would think, the numbers are so high.
We're also looking, we're looking in Waterbury, we're looking in Hartford, we're looking at Randolph. There are a lot of different projects that pop up all over the state. We're taking all comers. If it's something that we can support and they have staff to run it, that's the difficult part. If they don't, then we would have to put money behind staffing in order to make that happen.
So if you had 8 million instead of 4 million, to Bruce's point, would you build just those more temporary shelters to meet that?
Go more into the shelter system side than we want to put it into the hotel side.
Senator Sears, you're next, and
I
then
guess I'm gonna be the unpopular. As bad as motels are, and I agree with a lot of what you said, plus stuff we heard today in testimony and judiciary regarding motels and criminal activity. I'm not sure everybody who's in motels now is gonna be able to survive in congregate living, some of the problems that they present. You're talking about, shelters that have certain hours. I know in Bennington, at least the current shelter closes, I think at 9 AM or 8 AM, I can't remember which, doesn't matter. People have to go, either go to look for a job, go to the library, you know. I notice in Rutland every day when I stop at McDonald's, there's people there because they have to leave the shelter and, you know, they're sitting
during
in
the day.
McDonald's on Friday afternoon. And that's not for everyone. And I think it's I think we're trying to find solutions that avoid difficult problems, but the solutions are gonna create their own problems. And I totally agree with you on motels in terms of the profiteering and other behaviors, and many of them are substandard conditions. And many of them, according to non-state police and other law enforcement we talk to, have certain criminal elements. But if we completely think we're gonna get rid of the motels on June 30th, I just,
April 1st.
pardon me?
April 1st.
April 1st, and then on June 30th.
Some on April, some on June.
April
Yeah, I
first
think
was,
some, I think it's all, I'm trying to figure out the 8 million, 4 million, and how it all fits together. I'm glad I'm not on the committee that Health and Welfare is gonna have to figure that piece out. But just as my comment, and I don't envy your position in this particular mess,
well,
but we need to solve the problem.
the fundamental issue here, though, and the challenge is, the inadequacy of our housing supply. It's a capacity issue, and that we're seeing the collateral impacts, of that. So, but also, we know that as has been proven through the, housing first model, that people need to have supports in order to keep the housing once they get it. So, we are trying to piece it together the best we can. I think what we're concerned about, and I suspect that in some ways there will be April 1st, which was a deadline we set that would allow more of this work. Although I remember a comment made by the secretary when we started the program, there needed to be, it's sort of like going into, Desert Storm, why don't you go into like Iraq? And they said, because there's no exit plan. And I think, there's been a lot of discussion about long before you assume this position around what is that plan. And the plan had to be more than simply we'll just shut the program down, which seemed to be the plan that we were confronting, and then we put together this phase out. I think what we're seeing though is the concern that there are people that are in that cohort and have the characteristics that they do, that we will have to see what that looks like April 1st. It's a good deadline to shoot for, but I don't know as if we're gonna be where we need to be. And the question is, how are we gonna address the housing needs of those individuals beyond that period? And what that money will require. I imagine within the budget adjustment, what we have here is the money available, to be honest. And so we're gonna have to, when we're here, and we will be April, through April 1st, certainly, we'll have to have a lot more discussion around what's next. The other thing I really want to bring home is that this problem is much larger than DCF. And this building has tended to put the burden all on you. And you certainly, the department has been the funding source, but this enormity of our housing problem, which spans all income brackets, is just making a situation like we've never experienced. And I know we put money in last year's budget adjustment to the HCB for emergency housing. I don't know exactly where that spending and work stands, but I just need to restate that you need a lot of help from the rest of state government to really think how we're gonna, get to where we need to be, because it's way beyond whatever economic services was ever intended or designed or staffed or resources to ever deliver. And I do want to say, I think that there's been perhaps not the reality or recognition of the expectations that might exist of one department for something of this magnitude. And I just want to say, that we need to be cautious when we're doing that and making sure that everybody else feels is accountable for housing and this work as you're getting, it's being directed to you, but it's really much broader than that. So I think that's one of the things you look back, have DCF do a plan, DCF do this, DCF, and it really, to use the current jargon, it was way out of your wheelhouse and way out of your budget. And we've got to be realistic in terms of what we, how we design it and what we expect. And also, who else has to be feeling as accountable as you might be feeling at this point.
I appreciate that, son.
So center lines.
So you just said a lot that I would echo a little bit. I do want to say that the issue is one that hasn't been on the front burner because people have not felt that this was a pressing or very compelling issue. And so in that sense, you're accurate. DCF has been trying to work this through now for more than 2 sessions. And we have been talking with DACD and other in our committee, we've been doing a lot of this. And but I will say that it is critically important that DCF not feel uncomfortable in pushing back when pushback happens. So we're talking about $4 million here. There's 2.3 additional dollars also, so it's really 6.3 that we're talking about. And sure, I mean, that's important, but if you need human resources to make it happen, then you have to ask for that money and staffing to do that and yell and scream about it because we've been trying to get.
He can't,
No,
that's the
no,
reality.
Well,
Works for
then
the
let us
governor.
do it, but the point is that, I mean, ultimately, it falls on DCS shoulders. It's not the current commissioner that has lived through this historically, but it is there. Regardless of what we're saying, housing people are not looking at housing for people who have disabilities. The housing people, folks are not looking at housing for folks with chronic illnesses. And so there is the human welfare element that needs to be heard. Now we are hearing it. That's important. And we're seeing it in our communities. Finally, people recognize it as an issue. So I won't go any further, but I do agree with Senator Kitchell. It's a systemic problem. It's not an individual departmental problem or agency problem. But we keep saying, okay, well, let's extend this deadline. Okay, well, let's extend the motel program. But in the meantime, we want to know that something's happening so that we get to the end sooner or later. Might be 2 hotel rooms left, but.
Well, I think there'll always be because
Yeah,
people,
exactly.
let's face it, there'll be constructive evictions, there will be fires, there'll be domestic violence. We know that.
Weather problems.
But we just need to sort of recognize that, well, Chris might be sitting at the end of the table, and we tended to focus on DCF. You've been the pocketbook, but you haven't, you have to, it's not something you can solve and yourself. And I guess the question that we have then is, and one we are going to take up in the budget adjustment, obviously what, in terms of our discussion, this is a longer term discussion about what is going to be realistic, what is the plan, what will we have June 30th. Many of these vulnerable populations also, Department of Mental Health has been talking certainly, and Dale, and those are the populations Senator Lyons is talking about, and housing and our housing partners. And I know you've had a lot of, you're working together.
Yeah.
And so we're just gonna have to, we're sitting here right now. We'll have to be monitoring this pretty closely between, but we know what we know right now, but we're gonna see how things evolve. Like, what will this 4 million, sort of the plan, I think, was asked for in these 5 sites. What is the timeline for it, in terms of property acquisition, et cetera, back planning from June 30th in terms of what it will take and what actions by when will get us to whatever we think that 4 million will buy, plus the 2.3, plus whatever we put in for emergency housing and other bills in the past. And it's hard to keep track of all the pieces because it's sort of been done, over time. And what does it look like now?
How many physical sites do we have our eye on right now? Because having been around this issue for a long time, we don't have physical sites right now. They're not going to be open by April 1st.
I would love to come back and present some details about this plan. We can have it ready for next week. We had some similar requests from House Appropriations.
Yeah, I'm
to
sure.
Detail, like
You've made the press.
the dates, the dates the various populations would be coming out of the hotels and motels, the demographics of those folks, the conditions.
And those of us on joint fiscal are getting those monthly reports, and I can share them with you, so you can see.
Well, I wouldn't underestimate the workforce issues. I can only speak for Bennington County, but every nonprofit program in Bennington County is competing with McDonald's and a new Burger King and a new Panera Bread and a new Starbucks. And the pay in shelters and other nonprofit entities doesn't match that. And so and then we have another new program coming on board pretty soon in Bennington, a nursing home that's gonna compete. So I think we're, I wouldn't underestimate the workforce problems in creating a new shelter.
And we hear obviously the murder and it's just put a chill through people's concern about working and these programs. So I know that St. Johnsbury, the house is ready to go, but the Community Action Agency hasn't got, I guess, the staffing together, even though the housing piece has so it's.
Can't underestimate that problem in this state right now.
Yeah.
It's gonna continue for 12.
So I'm gonna, it's 10:04, and this is a longer term discussion. I think the question really is, you've got what you're proposing here. We don't think it's gonna get us to the finish line by any stretch, and what more will that look like, and be somewhat realistic in terms of what it might be. I understand what it's like. I've been at the other end of the table. You work for a governor and you're coming in with, your proposal, and decisions are made around money. And, but we also know this governor is also on his own, based on facts as they evolve, has taken steps to recognize the challenge and the human need here. So what we know today and what we'll have to deal with as we approach the April 1, I think, is yet to be determined. But in the meantime, it's encouraging, all this is happening, but it still is, I think people are saying it isn't gonna get us totally there.
And just to say that there is a lot of stuff happening. There has been a lot that we've done over the last year. There are a number of things in the works, but we're often reluctant to come out and talk about them before they're finalized because of the reactions that you get in communities and the opposition that sometimes builds. I think if there's any silver lining to this, that communities are more engaged and more willing in a number of areas. We're having conversations in Rutland where we haven't had them before. There are some cities and towns that are really embracing the need for additional shelter space. We're encouraged by that, but it's hard sometimes to talk specifics unless you've got it nailed down and most of the way down the road.
And when you're in property negotiations, you don't want to really.
There are a number of details about our plan that we can talk about very soon, and I think next week we could be ready to lay that out before you too.
Secure facility before you leave.
Well, that's not part of the budget adjustment, so.
No, he just has it on here.
We done?
Yeah.
Where?
The next two slides outline just our hierarchy. So it's listed within the appropriations, but we didn't,
You're
we
right,
don't have
it's
the
not part of budget
No.
adjustment.
It's not part of the budget.
Thank you.
All right, I'll hold my question.
Yeah, the last two slides are really just how we organize our budget and the different debt IDs.
Yeah, no, this, and we'll get into this, this is really part of what we would do with a full annual budget in terms of organization and which programs and so forth. So in terms of your budget adjustment, you have spending housing, obviously the one time. And then you have some PNMI adjustments, and I gather that's for the Lund home, and that's within reach up.
it's within both, it's the family service unit as well. If you're ready, we can turn to the
Yeah, why don't we?
ups and downs.
Do we have that?
Oh, we do it, well, we have a whole
It's on
agency
here.
one,
So it's on the 26th page one.
yeah. The ups and downs for you isn't part of this document,
Correct.
okay, part of the agency document. All right,
This is always fun because there's two versions of the same document that one breaks out GC and one doesn't. So yeah, this is all versions of the same.
yeah, it's this.
That's
page.
right, yeah.
All right, so what page is it? Or what section are we on here?
B316 would be our
B360.
primary.
Okay, B316 is administration and support.
So it's our,
There's the 211.
Page 12.
Oh, it's on the bottom of that page under grants. PNMI. The one?
In 317,
Yeah.
that's family services.
Yeah.
And I thought, I thought Lund was under reach up,
yes, down in,
which would be economic services.
it actually has its own appropriation on the programming side, so B323 is going to be a reach up appropriation.
And is that where the
That would be,
PNMI, Lund home?
that would be the Lund specific ones, yeah.
Okay.
There's 9 other providers within the PNMI system that would be on the family service side, so some of those adjustments also. Lund's the only one in reach up.
Yeah, like the group homes, the 204 Depot are in family services.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that we got lumped in it all together, so it was all reach up, and it was like, we tend to think PNMI, we think of,
Yeah.
the family services programs.
Welcome to our world.
What?
I said, welcome to our world. It's
Actually, I've experienced it world.
very much.
You've lived it.
Very much.
Shall I tell them who did the ups and downs sheet?
Yes, I know, you get the ups and downs sheet, but you might as well tell me. Her.
My legacy, ups and downs. Well, because there's so many moving pieces in some of the programs, particularly when you get into, you know, an annual budget. And so you're getting sometimes it's hard to track everything. So this is how I can logically track how you get to the bottom line. So we have the PNMI for both Reach Up, which is Lund, and then the family services, meaning your group homes that we have for kids that are in your custody. How many children do you have in your family, Commissioner? About 1,200?
No, it's not that many these days.
Oh.
It's below 1,000.
Oh.
Actually, in Cosmo, we
Yeah.
have a lot that are, there's another category now that doesn't count, but it creates work for social workers.
Oh,
What is the name of that?
I don't know that off the top of my head. It's been tree season.
Well, it's sort of like,
It's a supervised
Yeah,
child welfare arrangement where the
supervised.
children are still at home, but you retain, yeah,
under supervision.
yeah. Well, I don't
It's a
know.
group where, you know,
Okay, so these are the other changes, just PNMI and you were saying administration.
Yeah, do you wanna just walk through each section and we can
Yeah,
stop
why
and
don't
get
you quickly
questions?
do that?
Yeah. There's a lot of just technical adjustments as you're very familiar with, right? We get the base budget,
Yeah.
sometimes based on estimates, we then have to adjust when we have that.
Particularly like the Reach Up caseload, how is that performing? Based on your estimate?
Yeah. We did not make a caseload adjustment for this year, so we're holding to the original
So
budget.
it seems like the estimate was pretty good then.
Yeah, in FSD, you will see the subcare caseload pressures is a reduction, so we did overestimate originally for the base budget, so we are offering a reduction based on what we're seeing recently, very consistent with the lower case count in the systems. In administration, say technical adjustment for revenue, that 98,000 line. 211 revenue adjustment, this is to make their contract whole. They had about a $700,000 plus a year contract, now it's just over $1 million, so we needed to bridge the gap a little with the funding. We
You
have some,
could do it through commitment invest.
yeah, we're able to buy some GC dollars.
And you submitted a 211 report,
We did.
and it was like, I'm not sure what I was supposed to do with it. I read it. It was like, well, if other departments want the service, they need to notify us and maybe help fund. Was that kind of the summary of your
Yeah,
report?
I think you're reading between the lines there a little bit. It was really interesting over the last year to kind of unwind all the different things that 211 does and how it impacts each of the different departments. Of course, housing is a big one. But there are a lot of other departments and agencies getting service from 211.
Well, certainly with the emergencies, 211 with Irene and
That's last summer.
yeah.
Yeah, that's probably where the additional need comes from.
That's probably one of the things that we keep trying to push on here is their ability to scale up in times of great need.
Exactly.
They don't always they haven't always been successful in doing that. We want to make sure that capacity is there.
So we may be coming to asking that question in the committee.
So, all right, so 211.
And then the housing call center contract, that's the 1 year agreement to partner with the ESD call center. That's to address the wait time issue.
Which was really unacceptable.
Yeah. From hours to minutes is how we're
No,
seeing it. Yeah, I think down to, I think it was a 14-minute wait time we were seeing the first week of January, and that was higher than they were seeing because of the renewals.
but before you added this contract, it was very,
It was at more hours.
it was sort of like the health exchange
Or unemployment.
or unemployment. Well,
Yeah, or unemployment, people can't even call because they just get a recording saying, we have too many calls.
oh,
Call back later.
so you can't even
You
wait?
can't even.
Oh. Okay, so we're down to a better response. But then that's just to get through to the call center, then getting through to the worker
To a
takes
person.
time as well.
Yeah, I mean, generally, depending on what you're calling for, whether it's the economic services line or the general housing line, the calls do take time.
And then a small technical adjustment, when we were filling out the sheet for the build, we put $603 in the wrong column.
603,
So apologize for that, and we're fixing it here.
well, I'd like to spend a lot of time on that.
You only have to apologize for talking about it.
Yeah.
We don't-
We've exceeded
Okay.
the value of the
Yeah,
line.
I think so. All right.
Appreciate it. So that's admin, which is Commissioner's Office, Business Office, IT, as well as ESD functions all up in that one appropriation. B317 is Family Services.
Yeah, boy, you're taking advantage of global commitment then.
Yeah, we definitely do try to, and again, a lot of this is adjusting how things were originally presented in the 24 budget. It's not necessarily new things. The second line up in personal services, that random moment time study, that is, it's a new version of something that we've already been doing. It's a new and improved time study that we're doing that's more accurate, using our cost allocation vendor. Unfortunately, it's making it a little less favorable on the federal side, but it's much more easy to defend now.
Is that the homelessness?
No, it's a cost allocation formula. And so when a worker might be doing multiple benefits, food stamps, versus reach out and whatever, and so you have to, or the district director is supervising multiple programs, so it's how you allocate the cost across these programs and
Like
federal
how much
funding.
time different staff is spending on these?
Yeah.
Right.
So it's, and you have to have an accepted, the state has a whole formula accepted algorithm that, that's
right. Yeah, so it's 300, I think last year's count, there was 311 unique positions that coded into it. This is it's most of the staffing within FSD goes through the system. So it looks like a big number on here, but it's a very big program. TANF is just a revenue adjustment. You'll see an offsetting adjustment down in Reach Up where they cancel each other out. We're earning it. The federal side of and family services here. Down in grants, barge, again, if you have the more colorful ups and downs, this is just which type of general commitment, global commitment that we're earning. Moving it from one column to another. And then, so down into the PNMI, I can give you a little bit for what each of these lines are. So the inflation factor, this was the estimate that we built in. We had a $1.9 million line, both in BAA from last year, as well as billed for 24. That was an estimate. This 874 reduction is reducing that estimate now that we have updated information for 24. The next line, that 318 up, is carrying forward the spending authority from 23's BAA. We didn't pay all the bills, and it's global commitment. We can't carry global commitment dollars forward like we do with general fund. So this is to rebuy what we didn't get to spend last year. But it's the same money from last year. AHS held it. We're just buying it back. Super clear. Yeah. Revenue adjustment, so this is, again, we have some general fund that we're grossing up to true it up for where the bills are actually being paid, eligible for global commitment in this case.
So you need less general fund because you're getting the federal match.
That's right. We have activities that qualify for the global commitment, so we're able to leverage that. And then the last line is organic caseload pressure, reduction across all the sub-care activities. We're able to knock down based on the reduced case count. Family services. Child development, again, not a lot here. CB that's an annual federal award. This is just truing up to the new award amount. It was 200,000, now it's 175,000 a year.
Oh, that's the 25,000.
That's the 25,000 down. If you have the colorful form,
And we do.
we're just switching out that The GC is investment, not Medicaid, so just making that technical correction on our side. And then we did,
So you're having to switch it from just a global commitment to an MCO investment?
that's right. Yeah, from regular program, or there's a
Yeah.
number of different ways, yeah, it's an investment. And then the last line is to give a spending authority for the PDG grant, that will, we were awarded for last year. We got some spending authority last year through an excess receipts request. We're building it into the budget this year through BAA. It'll be around for a few years, so we just wanted to get it into the base so that we didn't have to fill up more every year.
That's the 3.8.
That's the 3.8.
Yeah, it's the preschool development grant program.
Nothing in child support, office child support. AABD, so this is because, again, it's GC. We did increase the personal needs amounts that are the distributions on the supplemental side. And this is just, we had the money last year. It was enacted.
Isn't this the increase to the state sub?
That's
federal
right.
SSI benefit?
That's right, yeah.
Which we put in, well, actually, we got in, that was a new high, getting an appropriation in a tax bill. Because the governor, whom we work for, was proposing a tax reduction, and I went in with a list of things that, if you reduce revenues, these are things that really make it impossible to do anything about, and we hadn't done an AABD. Most people didn't know what AABD was, because there hadn't been an increase, I think, in 2 decades. But last year, rather than giving all the tax reductions that were being proposed, this freed up money to finally do something. This is administered by.
Is that part of the overall report that we will get?
I was just gonna say, we're gonna get a report back on
The
that.
agency from where we are falling behind and where we are?
I don't think it's like reach up where we have a statutory in language relative to the level of.
But when does that report come?
It's gonna come out about the same time as budget, that's what you checked on. If we were to fully fund reach up.
So this wouldn't show up in that report?
No, not necessarily, because I don't think there's statutory language around the level of the state up to the SSI benefit. This is the old AABD, which is aid to the aged, blind, and disabled, for those of you who.
Dates back to.
Dates back, yeah. So let's keep going.
Yep.
General assistance.
Nothing in GA.
Well, except we
Well,
did add,
yeah.
certainly for housing, temporary housing, 7.5 million to the
Correct.
base last year.
Correct. And the 8.2 that we presented would be there, but it's being proposed as a one-time duct ID rather than as part of the base. So it's associated with that, but it doesn't show up in the ups and downs.
No, but it's in addition to what we did in the base.
Correct. 3 squares, no adjustment. Reach up. So yes, as you noted, the PNMI, same idea, rate, increased cost. That's part of the 1.9 that was given in 24. We were reducing it in family services. None of it actually got applied to reach up originally. So this is bringing some of it into reach up of that, the 1.9 that was from the base.
So it just all got appropriated one place and it should have been split.
Yeah, that's correct. And then that's the corresponding adjustment for the 24. There's the other side of the TANF adjustment. And same idea, carrying forward general fund from unpaid bills from last year. This is how we have to carry forward the general, or the global commitment.
I think, are the rest, weatherization, that's not,
Yeah, I think that's the end. Yep.
that's the end, okay. All right, that's the end. It's probably the end of us at 10 after 4, and it looks like it's starting to snow. Other questions? Senator Sears, did you want to ask about, you had testimony in terms of, the various options you're currently pursuing for the secure facility.
Right, yeah.
Did you want to ask that
I was
question?
just asking an update on the secure facility at Middlesex.
Sure, last I've heard, it's still on schedule to open the end of this month. We're gonna do a walkthrough next Friday, actually, and see how things are going. That's 4 beds. And then we have the
4 beds total.
4 beds total. And then we have the RFP for the permanent facility. That has been issued. It's being reissued for a technical correction, but that's out anytime now as well.
And that could be anywhere.
That one was asking for bids on 2 sites, one in Virginia and one in South Rome.
And that would be a
Secure.
Does that mean that you, at some point, are going to announce that your original proposal to do site of the secure facility in Newbury is being modified?
We'll have an
I know you're
announcement
not
on that
prepared to say
sometime.
it,
Yeah, I
but
can-
at some point,
And we still have to look at the big picture of all the different needs that we have across human services, and maybe that site is appropriate.
well, it was approved for group home because it did function as a group home. Well, I know that there are people that are very
I'm sure they are.
anxious to
That's
hear that you've made a decision,
Understood.
and so are we.
And thank you. Do you have a vet, I hate the term vendor, somebody who's bid on running the Middlesex program?
We still don't have a vendor, but we're in
Is it
talks.
called a vendor?
I think vendors, provider.
Provider, thank you.
Provider. It sounds a little more, otherwise it sounds like candy cane and popcorn or
It's a little
something.
more complicated.
So you still will need somebody to run the program?
We absolutely do, and that's our intent, is to get someone to run that just as soon as we can. We're in talks.
Good. Glad to hear it. It's more than needed.
That's right.
Well, that's good news for you, Senator.
Maybe.
An ad in the Daily Chronicle.
Good with that, Middlesex.
Is that true now, or that's?
Did we get that date down?
Yes, I think so. Thank you. Needless to say, I'm personally interested.
Yes. The Middlesex is what we would consider temporary until permanent.
And the permanent would be in one of those 2 identified sites. Well, that's encouraging that there are more options. I mean, and I know that there were a lot of lessons learned, and I'm just glad that, that the when ding. My carpool, what time do I want to head out? I guess it's probably meaning what time he's really anxious to head out.
Right, he's outside the door.
He's probably, any other questions? We'll obviously be having much more discussion, and any information or update you can give and specificity as it would relate, I think would be helpful in terms of the numbers that you gave us today, and with the 5 sites, what you have for estimated capacity development, and then we just have to keep working with the permanent housing side and the special populations. So,
One
yes,
quick question, because Senator Sears mentioned congregate. Are you saying that all those sites will be congregate shelters? Or?
No, the vast majority would not be. I wouldn't say none of them will be congregated, so I'm gonna take that option off the table, although we know it's much better practice to go non-congregate.
right, I think that the cots and 3 hots and a cot approach is probably not desirable. Okay, I'm going to, at this